Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
On the fluid mechanics, so that's why I titled it like For the Love of Fluids, because it was one of my favorite subject when I studied the engineering program, and which also motivated me to go further to do masters and PhD, etc. So I will not go like into very research, say the research topics that we deal with. I will show some of the things that I do briefly, mostly through videos, and then some of the pedagogical aspects as well, like what constitutes this fluid mechanics, etc. I think in the 11th class syllabus you have a fluids section, right? So you studied pressure, and you studied Bernoulli equation, yeah, viscosity, great. Okay, so that makes my job very easy. So the beauty of this subject, as I say, is it's very visual. So it's a very visual subject. You can appreciate the aesthetic aspects of it. For example, these were the videos that we captured for some demonstration. So there is a two thin plates to which we are passing another colored liquid. It's just a demonstration of some principle. So it's basically, you can see it's there is some flow taking place. Again, similarly, if you change the fluid properties and things like that, you can change these things, and then you can observe different patterns, etc. So, and another thing is what we generally do is to understand things that happens quite fast. We do what we call a high speed imaging. Basically, you have a camera. So generally, do you know what is the frame rate of a general video camera? Yeah, smart people. Okay. So, but when the things happen quite fast, we have to capture images at very high speed. So we use a high speed camera, and this is one instant of such thing when a droplet is a water droplet is hitting another pool of water. Okay, you can see the structures, the crown formation, etc. So this is generally not so observed with your naked eye, right? That's why you need this kind of sophisticated things. So these are it's not readable, so I put a channel in which we put most of these videos there. So you can see it's very visually very appealing, right? Maybe that's why people, like many artists, got motivated to observe things. So this is a picture by, so yeah, so Da Vinci, he was a polymath, he did a lot of things. So some people consider him as a father of engineering. So he drew this looking at observing the flow, how the flow is taking place, and the complex patterns inside this. So you can see the structures that are shown there. So nowadays we try to understand it in other, a research wise, more rigorous way, but still he was one of the person who observed these things first. And then, yeah, of course, yeah, right. So yeah, this is one of the paintings by Van Gogh called Starry Nights. And anyone have seen it? In real life? Okay. But of course, now you don't have to go anywhere to see it, right? You can always search in Google. And I don't know if it still exists. Google had some art project, something like that. Yeah, so if there you can see a lot of paintings in a very high resolution way. So the idea is you can see the structures like that, right? So again, it motivated some people to study it and do some research on it. So some people studied how these patterns are changing, etc. So this is just to say that people approach this from different ways, and especially it crossed the boundaries, because the artists and non-engineering or non-scientific people will also get interested in this subject. So yeah, so as I said, that PhD is philosophy, right? So let's hear some philosophy. So yeah, so who is this guy? Okay, good. Let's see what he says.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
So he actually gave a definition of fluid, He's explaining all the physics of it, right? So he's so in our childhood, he was like a very, he's a martial arts hero, right? We always looked up to his movies. But very few people understand him like a philosopher, and especially you can read about it. His way of writing the journals and are very, it's very studied. So he explains it, right? So that's kind of a definition of, say, this, how things flow. But we'll slowly see, like, it can little bit of cheat you. Say, is this definition, whatever we say, like in fluid mechanics, we say, okay, water is something that takes the shape of the container that feels like that. Is it obeyed always like that? Let's see. So, who is this guy? Yeah, Shakespeare. Maybe you may know one of his well-quoted quotation, right? Not this one. Yeah, so I made something look similar to that. So it says to flow or not to flow. So even as scientists, we find it very hard to distinguish this. So that's why we will see. Yeah, I have a small. Yeah, I took a small demo, but I think you might have seen it before, right? The same thing. Yeah, I heard there was another talk before. So yeah, then someone can revise it for me. What is this? Why is this special? Okay. Highly plastic. Okay. So how do you consider it, as a solid or a fluid? Okay. See, as I said, yeah, that's why I said we still don't know how to put it, but you might have seen it, right? You can drop it and it bounces back, and you keep it for a small time, it will start. So these are like the boundary of say the boundary of the subject, right? You don't know how to define it and how to deal with it. So that's why we have different domains for it. So all of you have seen it, right? So you have experienced it, and this is the same material. You might have, maybe you have played with it, right? You can. So it's a matter of time. If you do it very slowly, it kind of flows. But if you do very quickly, you can see it breaks like a solid. It's a matter of time. So we have a saying in one of the subjects. There is a number. There is a non-dimensional number. There's a non-dimensional number called Deborah number. So it is told that he got attached to this because he said apparently even the mountains flow, right? So, but it's a bit hard to imagine, right? So, but still you might have heard about these glaciers and very large scale structures. Over time they can move, but that time is a matter of it can be years or it can be lot more. So yeah, so this was an example. Now I will also say how large, or what are the range from how small to big this subject that deals with the material or the things that are there. So yeah, what is this? Jupiter. Yeah, and you can say there is people call it a great red spot. So there's a big storm which is more than the size of Earth, is there. So people try to study it again with the same principles that we study in fluid mechanics. Then look at, see, this is a, it's not an actual image, it's a computer generated image of these carbon nanotubes. This is like a, so these are individual carbon atoms that you are looking at. You heard of carbon nanotubes? So what is it?
Well, it's a nanoscale structure that's entirely of carbon. And that carbon is arranged in a hexagonal lattice.
It's like graphene, exactly. So it's like an allotrope of carbon, right? Yeah. So people try to study how the flow is taking place through it. Okay, so see the range from a massive sized storm in a different planet to the, what you can say, to the atomistic level. So that's the range that we deal with. And like we said, we have a like semi-solid kind of thing, sometimes which will not appear to you as a fluid, can still, some people study it like a fluid. So this is this is one video I took, and so these are like these are some flock of birds, right? You can see they come together and then they move in a particular fashion, right? It's not a very random motion. They do move with some, as if they are communicating each other. So this also is interestingly, is also studied, can be also studied using the principles of fluid mechanics. So now you see it's what is the range that we are dealing with. Okay, and so now I will slowly talk about what I did a little bit. It's called somewhat what you can say, we call it interdisciplinary when you cross the boundaries and talk with scientists of different domains. For example, for many of my research, I've been working with people with a biological background, because only when you talk with the people with other domains of different expertise, you get new ideas. Just like now you share, now you talk about your place and then people from other places, you share a lot of say information, as well as you get a new perspective of how we can understand things better. So like that, I did from the mechanical engineering, I did a little bit of detour and studied a little bit of biological aspects. And one you can say subtopic is what we call like biomimetics. So anyone heard of this term? Biomimetics. Exactly. So it's a, yeah, you can somewhat call it like a bio inspiration. So you get inspired from what things are there in the nature, because as engineers we realize that after doing a lot of research, we realize that it's hard to beat nature in terms of engineering, because there are a lot of things that you can learn from, that it's like a, what you can say, altogether it's like it's a highly engineered world out there in nature. So people try to adapt a lot of things and make things like that. So this is one example. So it's a garden. Yeah, it's a garden by the bay in Singapore. They try to make a whole canopy, whole forest-like structures, and try to mimic whatever the functionalities of each of these, say all the different systems of these plants, and then basically making an artificial forest. So people do that so that, because we need trees, right? And it's hard to grow such a tree in a very short time. So that is one example of it. And so another, when you say biomimetics, people, one of the example, sorry, this one, right? Yeah, I will come to it. So this is the basic, comes from here. We call it like lotus leaf effect. In this, I think you might have seen this in many other leaves. Most of them, as I said, it's the evolution is the greatest engineer. So it has been evolved to survive in these aquatic environments. So that's why they repel this water. And how are they doing it? So they do it using, not because the material itself is very non-sticky, they have small structures that's like, they're of the order of microns, and even it's hierarchical. So you have micron structures over which you have nanostructures. So yeah, so that also lead to kind of a cushioning effect. So that's why this droplet is not a, water droplet is not a sticking to it, it's just rolling it. So people try to engineer this, use as he said, like making some coatings which can repel this water. Now we can, there are available products in the market which you can apply to the windshields of the cars and things like that. So the inspiration actually comes from this lotus leaf. And yeah, so I did a little bit of study on that. So these are the electron microscopy images of these structures and how we can replicate it, how we can artificially make it, and then study how these droplets interacting with it. And then I did a little bit of study in mimicking. Again, it's a mimicking, but not like so this is in a heart, how the heart is functioning. So I didn't make an artificial heart, but I was more interested to see how it works, and to study that we have to create models of these blood vessels. So the blood vessels are different from, say, a normal tube or normal pipe, because they deform once they are like a, what you can say, kind of elastic. So if you pump it with a high pressure, it keeps deforming. So you can, maybe, I don't know if it's visible, you can see it's kind of, maybe it's the video is not so clear. So it's like a, you can see, yeah, maybe you can see a small pulse. So we studied that using, by artificially creating these kind of vessels, and also studied with red blood cells. They're also, they consist, they're the ones actually who give the red color to the bloods, right? And they do have a particular shape which is very important for their functioning, which is, sorry, yeah, kind of that shape, biconcave shape. But their function is to transfer the oxygen to different parts, right? So they have this particular shape. So they have a maximum area, and they can carry as much as oxygen possible. So if you are sick or something, suppose disease like anemia, so this shape gets changed, and then it will affect the oxygen transport, and then you will be more sick. So I studied a little bit of that by using some RBCs, and then taking these RBCs and pumping through this kind of deformable channels. And we studied how this shape deformation of these RBCs, how they are getting affected when they are interacting with these deformable walls. That is another aspect of this biomimetics. And then, so yeah, it's a bit technical term, like so in fluid mechanics, so one of the lower range you go, we call it microfluidics, because the flow is going now happening in micron sized channels, which means again, it's like of the order of what you see in your blood vessels. And nowadays it's a very emerging field, because this at micro scale we can make devices which can perform a lot of actions, and we call it like a lab on a chip, because on a small chip you can create these micro channels and then have flow through it, and do mostly it finds importance in biomedical applications. You can see you can do a lot of biomedical assays, testing, etc. So one of the, even maybe during the COVID you might have seen these kits, right? These paper like test kits, right? So many of them work on the principles of this microfluidics and capillary action. So yeah, so that is another area in which we make these micro channels to, and then do the flow and then study how it can be useful. So one of these experiments that we perform is using different droplets. So these are different droplets. So I did a colored droplets to identify it better. And I will tell you one interesting observation from this. So you can see that we are doing a fast motion and then there is a slow backward motion, right? So as we do each, you can see since the larger droplets move a bit slower. So that way you can bring, see, the green and the blue will come together and eventually you can mix them. So these are like 500 micron, like 500 micron sized like half mm diameter channels. So we can use it to do a lot of experiments where you need this kind of mixing. For example, as I said, in biomedical applications, in many chemistry experiments you might have mixed and looked at the color, right? So these kind of experiments can be performed at a micro scale, and the biggest advantage is that you need very less sample material for it. So that way you save a lot of basically a lot of money on the reagents. Suppose if you are going to lab and do a test, you will be needing like these biological reagents, right? So usually those are quite expensive. It's very hard to manufacture them. So using the techniques in microfluidics, you can save a lot of material and thereby save a lot of money. So that is the what you can say, a very applied area of fluid mechanics where a lot of people are now working, and then even a lot of companies are also working to create this kind of devices. So if you now, I'll go a little bit academic. So to study this, you have different types of, what you can say, as I said, different streams coming together. So you studied fluid mechanics and then you have solid mechanics, right? So there is there is a domain called this fluid structure interaction, in which you study how the fluid is interacting with, say, a solid structure and how it interacts back. For example, if you are doing in case of a flight, if you have a wing and then there is air flowing, you get the lift, right? The flight starts to fly like that. So the flow around in such as say this airfoil is getting affected by the airfoil, and sometimes this airfoil can also affect the flow. So there is what we call, it's like a coupled phenomena. So you need to understand how this coupled phenomena works to design things better. If you don't, yeah, things like this will happen. So it's a short video of a bridge that was constructed. It was in the US. So they had a very nice bridge. They had a very grand ceremony of opening, and then the wind came and it started to like flutter, and then the wind got higher, and like, yeah, luckily there was no like a human casualty, but eventually like it couldn't sustain the wind that was coming, and it failed basically. So yeah, so the story is like there was a dog inside that car. He was trying to save it, but unfortunately it didn't want to come, and then that dog was the only casualty in that incident. So now you have a plaque for the memory of that dog there. So so you can say how, if you don't design things properly, how it can leads to failure. So yeah, so this is also the same principles also applying, like I said, in the, let's say, the flow through these deformable vessels. In that also the fluid flow is interacting, fluid flow is affecting the wall deformation, And at the same time, this wall deformation is affecting back the fluid flow. So it also comes under this fluid structure interaction. So this requires both expertise of fluid mechanics as well as solid mechanics, and many times, like in aerodynamics, aerospace engineering and civil engineering, it's a very important aspect to look into when you design structures. And how do we do this? We say, I've been talking a lot about how this flow taking place. How do you observe the flow? So how do you measure? How do you measure the properties? Like when we are doing an experiment, we need to measure things, right? So how do you measure pressure? What is the instrument that you use to measure pressure? Manometer, barometer, okay, venturimeter, okay, great. So in that I don't know, you might have done this experiment in the labs, or you studied it in textbooks, okay, good. So when you do an actual experiment, so it's like so you take this probe and then put it into place, right? And then measure what is the pressure, and then from there you estimate based on the principles. But to actually see the flow, we have to visualize it, right? So that's where we use many techniques in our lab. Also, we use a technique for this visualization using these tracer particles. So what we do is we put these tracer particles. So these are these white spots, right? They are the tracer particles, and then that tracer particles can it will move according to the flow, right? So this is a flow of a fish locomotion. The fish is like moving around, and you can see the flow patterns, and then based on the tracer particles motion, we can estimate basically we first estimate the displacement, which is the motion of this, and then based on the images that we take and the frame rate that we use, from the displacement we can calculate divided by delta, what are the time difference, you get the velocity, and these are the velocity vectors that are plotted. So this is one of the very important and powerful technique that we use for measuring this flow field. So the advantage compared to say a venturimeter or things like that is that it can capture the field, right? An entire domain, an entire area. Now if you want to do at a point by point, yeah, it's going to take a lot of time to probe each point, right? So that way, this is one of the, as I said, one of the very what you can say, important and very useful tool for this thing. So we downsize it, and then we use microscopes to do the same thing using in a micron scale. So you have even smaller particles, and then you can do the same. So we call it like it's like the technique is called image velocimetry using particles. So it's called particle image velocimetry. Okay, so again a bit into academic. So every physics principles that you study, there will be some equations behind it, right? So what is that most used equation in physics? Okay, Newton's. Okay, Newton's second law. What does it say? F is equal to, and P is, okay, great. So it estimates the force, right? And to understand the fluids also, you want to see what is the force acting, and the same, this Newton's law is applied to fluids, and we call it, yeah, I mean, you don't have to think too much about it. It's called Navier-Stokes equations. It's named after Navier and Stokes, so who tried to find this independently. So this is the fundamental equation that we use in fluid mechanics. Stokes law is, yeah, so everything that you have seen, this Stokes law or the Bernoulli equation, everything is coming from this equation. So this is the most general equation that is out there. It's a very complicated equation. It's not like a very algebraic equation. It's a differential equation. But if you want to study fluid mechanics, so this is the equation that you will be dealing with on a daily basis. And yeah, I mean, so for who are doing like research you spend so much time with it so that you can go with crazy. So this is a video so this is a very nice YouTube channel by a professor from Oxford. So he got so crazy with it that he even like tattooed this equation on his body. See, so now you see the equation, right? So yeah, so that's the equation. We call this Navier-Stokes equation. Now where do we use this equation? Suppose you have this equation, so instead of like just solving problems, you can use it and different different applications, right? So one thing I wanted to mention is I wrote it like $1 million question because it's actually $1 million question. So because it is not solved, it's not a solved equation. In mathematics you have equations and you solve it, right? But as you go further, yeah, because in exams you need to solve equations because then only we can also grade you, right? But in life the solved problems cannot be solved, right? Like that, this equation is it doesn't have a neat solution. People try with different techniques, but there is no actual solution exists for this equation. So it's yeah, it's a bit weird, right? You have a very simple Newton's law, but when you apply it to fluids, it's hard to solve. So we use like other techniques, but if you do it from a mathematical point of view, you cannot solve it. That's why it's one of the Millennium Prize problems. That's why I said if you solve this, so there are like I think there are 7 Millennium problems. So it's one of it because now you see how important it is. If you solve this, basically you will get $1 million. So yeah, that may be one motivation for you to study fluid mechanics. And then, like I said, these equations, where do you use it? So you should have some. Otherwise, why people, yeah, put a bounty for it or keep working on it? You can see like it again shows the wide range of aspects where this fluid mechanics come in a daily life. For example, in weather modeling. So you see this prediction for this. Yeah, I think there is some. Yeah, so it's basically a kind of cyclone, satellite images, and then you predict this, right? You see the cyclone warning, things like that. So how do people predict it? Of course, this weather modeling involves a lot of probability and statistics, etc. Still, the basics is in the understanding of these fluid mechanics principles. And then another thing is in terms of those who are interested in automobiles and racing, you know this. You have to the difference between a racing car and a normal car is that it's designed so that there is very less drag on it, right? So that it can go very fast. So obviously you need to study what is the flow around it, and there are techniques. As I said, though mathematically we cannot solve it, we have found other techniques which by using very powerful computers we can kind of see how the flow is taking place. So it's doable and people are doing it. And interestingly, so although I said in real life, it is also used to create fake things. For example, this CGI, computer graphics in movies. So yeah, which movie it is? Yeah. Is there anyone who haven't watched this movie? Okay. Definitely watch that movie, and I suggest all movies by Christopher Nolan because like, yeah, he makes sure that the science is correct. He doesn't make movies in which people just fly or do very crazy things. So you know what I mean. Okay. So in this so this is one example. You can see like in movies you have a lot of computer graphics, right? To be very realistic, for example, in this they have this. You might have remember these giant waves that are coming, right? It's completely computer generated. So to create that in a computer, you need to understand how you, what is the principle behind it, right? So that's why this is also important if you want to make movies also. That's my point. Another thing is in video games. So I don't know. Yeah. Sorry for the audio. So this is like it's a video. It's a game. I think it's a GTA. Yeah, it's a Grand Theft Auto. So you see, you can do swimming in a game, right? So it was surprising to me because when I was looking at it, like searching for it, there were video tutorials to how to swim in GTA. Right? So there can be video tutorials on how to swim in swimming pool, right? So to me, it went to that level that there are tutorial videos for swimming in a GTA. Okay, so the point is like, see, these are very spontaneous, right? Unlike the CGI in movies, this has to be very dynamic, because every time you sim, you don't sim in the same way, right? Because it has to be responsive, right? He has to sim like the way you press the buttons. So this again involves a lot of the physics engines that goes behind the CGI or the visual effects, that you go deep, you see that it all involves the basic equations like the Navier-Stokes equation I said. Again, my point is like, if you want to get job in any of these domains, you need to understand fluid mechanics. Okay. Yeah. So to give you some academic sense of it, you can see, again, you can see a lot of videos, right? You can search a lot of videos in YouTube. This is one of the very, very good YouTube channel called Lutetium Project by some scientists in University of Paris. They created a lot of videos which demonstrates this fluid mechanics principle, even like, as I said, these microfluidic chips and then droplets and many basic principles like surface tension, capillarity, etc. So I highly recommend you to go through this one. So these are actually made by researchers, and then they explain things, so it will be better for you to understand it. And then like, it's a matter of curiosity. Just wanted to show how we can do things that we like, even if you have some limited equipment, right? So this is with some very rudimentary electronics and some jugglery, you can create very nice these images. So this is, I showed in the very beginning, right? There is a video of this droplet. So in photography, we have something called a droplet splash photography. So you can create this even without a high-speed camera. You can time using, as I said in the previous slide, right? Using some electronics, you can time it so that you can create a what you can say, very high-speed images, but without a high-speed camera. Just you give it the flash at the instant where you want. As I said, it's a domain in photography itself, and then you can capture like a lot of very nice images, and then like even you can do some studies with it. So currently, I am also building some setup in which we can capture this kind of images to study things further, and even like you can create the images that you see in textbooks, right? So this is a golf ball hitting a water. You can see the patterns behind it. So you can see the patterns when the ball structure, the ball surface is changed. So you have you seen golf ball? You know why it is so special? Is there anything special about it? It has grooves. Yeah, it has it's called dimples, right? It has dimples. So why does it have dimples? So now what is the motivation to put some dimples, right? You just can't just use any ball, right? Okay. This is another image in which you can study so droplet which is impacting on some surfaces. So yeah, I think I'm coming to the end of this. So I will stop with this is one video that I made some time back. The most important fluid that is around there, that is water. So it's a video that shows the different forms of water. Yeah. So with that, I would like to, thank you. I would like to thank all my previous people who have worked with me. Thank you.